It's Paul Hawksby and Andy Jacobs here on talkSPORT, and we are, of course, paying tribute to Shane Warne. This awful news in the last 10 minutes. We'll hear from Bumble a little bit later on. Steve Harmison is still with us. I'm going to chat to Jarrod Kimber, regular voice here on talkSPORT, filmmaker, journalist, statistician, and an Australian, of course. And as we said, overnight, it's sort of 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning for Australians. They'll be waking up to this news, Jarrod, and I'm sure that the nation will be in a state of shock.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. You know, I grew up in Melbourne. Aussie rules football is the biggest thing in Melbourne. Obviously, it completely dominates everything from the political chat on down. And for, 15, 20 years, Shane Warne was bigger than Aussie rules football. He was almost cricket on its own in Melbourne, completely dominated everything. I mean, my story of my childhood is I started playing cricket as a young leg spinner, believe it or not. Before Shane Warne came on the scene, I was the only leg spinner in my competition. 3 years later, every team had 2 leg spinners. You cannot even understand how much he changed Melbourne, Victorian, and Australian sport. He was just, they once gave him his own chat show. And as you know, he's not exactly the most talented person. They just gave him his own chat show because he was Shane Warne, right? He was that famous. He got his own chat show.
Yeah, he had a brilliant sense of drama too. The 700th wicket, to take it, in an Ashes test at the MCG was perfect, wasn't it, for him?
Yeah, I mean, he was, his nickname was Hollywood, and it was partly because he dyed his hair and because he wanted to be famous. But he just had this amazing ability to be the most important person in any given moment. 99 World Cup, that Gatting ball that you played before, dismissing Andrew Strauss, the 700th wicket. Again and again, he was just absolutely captivating. And he's not a fast bowler, right? Or a great batter. Like almost everyone else who'd been famous in cricket before him had been one of those two things. No one cared about spin before Shane Warne. It was, people were talking about it as a dying art. And he on his own sort of revived this just by being bigger than the sport itself. And to show, you guys just played that commentary of Richie Benaud. I had a poster on my wall that was just the commentary of Richie Benaud of that ball. That's all it said. It just had a picture of Gatting looking back at his stumps. And it had all the words of, Gatting has absolutely no idea what happened to it. And then there's a slight pause. And later he says, still doesn't know. Like that phrase was so famous. And everything about it. For those who don't know, he was also, I think, the first Nike cricketer. Like Nike came to Australia to get Shane Warne involved. And there's like photos of him with Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan's in his pomp. He was that level of famous.
And I think also, as an England cricket fan, that every Ashes series, he'd say he developed a new ball. Even if he hadn't, he got in the minds of the batsmen. It wasn't just that he was a brilliant bowler. It was also psychologically the way he played the game.
We'll bring Steve Harmison is still with us. We'll chat to Jarrod again in a moment. Steve, that was true, wasn't it? Before every Ashes series you guys were involved in, Shane would have something to say about that. He'd be trying to get inside your heads.
Zuter or whatever it was.
Yeah, you would. And there'll be this footage of Nasser Hussain describing that playing in the Ashes just before sort of my time, and I think to sort of go off Nasser's words, where he said Shane Warne would come over and he said he would have like 52 different balls and Zuter and all that come, and just batsmen just shouting to Duncan Fletcher, get videotapes of this and get videotapes of that. And in theory, he had 2 or 3 cricket balls that he bowled were so devastating. But it was the mental side of Shane Warne which put batsmen under pressure. Jarrod mentioned Hollywood, but I've said this many times before when people ask me what was it like when playing against Shane, and the best way I describe it is when you're standing at the non-striker's end as a number 11, and you're not meant to be out there for a while, for a long time. I found myself watching him. That's how everything that's going to be said about Shane in the next hours, months, weeks, years is true. I found myself standing at the non-touch striker's end, not concentrating on what was happening with my partner at the other end, just because I was watching this amazing character, an artist at work, and you were engrossed in what Shane was. And he did have this aura about him. He did have this figure about him which made him that he was, the level of greatness that he was. And we're talking about, Jarrod mentioned Nike and talking about a cricketer. This is world sport. This is up there with anybody in world sport for me. Shane Warne put cricketers on the map, and he was the one that really had people around the world looking at cricket because of, largely down to one man and one character. It wasn't so much the bowler, it was the character of Shane Warne, and that's what makes it so sad.
Absolutely.
And he had great longevity, and Jarrod will remember this. He am I right in saying he had to remodel his action, didn't he, after shoulder surgery?
Yeah, I mean, a generation before, he probably disappears. He just happened to hit the right time with Australian sport, and that they had the money to send him overseas. His fingers fell apart. His shoulder fell apart. A human being is not supposed to spin the ball as much as Shane Warne did, right? And part of his physicality was when he was young, he had leg problems, and he actually dragged himself around in this little cart. And he had these incredibly strong shoulders. Harmy will tell you, you watch Shane Warne standing next to a normal spinner, and physically he dwarfs them, right? Spinners aren't built like Aussie rules footballers, and Shane Warne was. And so you're right, Andy. He had two different careers. He had one career where he spun the ball probably as much as any human being has ever spun the ball. And then he had another career where he basically tricked people into believing he was still that guy from when he was young. I mean, it was all this. I remember talking to another leg spinner who Shane Warne said was more talented than him, another guy that came up through Melbourne. And I said to him, if Shane Warne said you were more talented, why didn't you make it? Why did you? And why did he? And he said, if I got hit for a 4, I'd look at the batter like I'd made a mistake, and the batter's looking at me like, I've got him now. If Shane Warne got hit for 4, he'd look at the batter as if to go, that's exactly what I wanted you to do. Thank you for stepping into my trap.
That's true.
Steve, there'll be lots of stories, I'm sure, as once we try and take this in at the moment, but it will become a celebration after this period of shock, and people will talk about him not just as a cricketer but as a man, and as a man who liked to social, and you were very fortunate to have shared a beer with him in a dressing room after games, and I'm sure socially as well. So what was he like away from the cricket field?
He's the most amazing human being. He was. He had time to talk about cricket. That's why it's what you're going to hear in the next hours, weeks, months, years is the character of Shane Warne, especially from his teammates, but even the opposition. When he was in the dressing room, he was behind the scenes. There was this character that Mark Nicholas described that's fit a lot of stuff in 52 years, and his infectiousness. He was a generous man, and I mean a really generous man to a T, and somebody. To be honest, guys, I don't even think words could be good enough to describe what Shane Keith Warne was as a cricketer and as a person. It really is. It really is. It's. I sit here. Very, very difficult. And this is somebody that you played against for the whole entire all of my international career was played against Shane Warne, and that it's going to be you're right, a celebration of a fantastic character and a fantastic life that is taken so early. But you are going to hear from names from all around the world of sport and in show business and in life, because that's the mark of the man and what he touched other people's lives. He's an amazing man, and I can't think of what it's from a family point of view. I really am struggling now.
No. I understand.
But Jarrod, as we said, Australians will be waking up to this news. It's been a dark 24 hours for people who love Australian sport, not just cricket, or Rod Marsh as well. It's just awful, isn't it? I mean, two men from different eras. Rod had been ill, but I think this will shock people to the core of this news when they wake up in the morning.
Yeah, it's also, for Victorian cricket specifically, obviously, it's not that long ago that Dean Jones passed away. And Dean Jones is not universally known around the world in the same way that Shane Warne is. But in Victoria, they're 1 and 2, right? 1 and 2 with Merv Hughes sort of as the third guy. So, Victoria, I think, probably barely gotten over their feelings over Dean Jones, and now Shane Warne has left them. Rod Marsh is, Harmy will be able to talk about this. You could get Gareth Batty to talk on about this. I think Gareth Batty was in Rod Marsh's first international class at the academy. Rod Marsh has basically trained the world's cricketers. He taught cricketers how to be professional, which is hilarious when you look at Rod Marsh, because he looked like a big drinking, slightly overweight guy, but he was an incredible athlete, and he changed world cricket, Rod Marsh, in the coaching and the coaches that he coached that went around the world went on. Just two absolute giants of the game, one sort of in front of the camera and one sort of behind it, I suppose.
Yeah.
Known as well to so many. We're seeing pictures, Steve, of the guys in the pavilion over in Antigua, the England players playing in this warm-up game. And because he continued travelling the world, continued commentating, would chat with the current crop. All these boys currently playing cricket out there, and the Windies players as well.
In India too, because of his effect in the IPL. The first season of the IPL, he won it with the Rajasthan Royals, and so he helped launch this thing that's become the biggest thing in world cricket now. So that's a big part.
This is not really someone Harmy was known to just a generation of cricketers. He was known to all generations. The current crop knew him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben Stokes played for him last year or the year before at Rajasthan Royals when Warne was there as coach, mentor, or I'm not sure what his full title was, but I think he was in charge of the cricket side in Rajasthan. So Ben Stokes would have seen an up close and personal with Shane, but he's commentated on the TV for a number of years now in England. So when you're on the field of a morning, you get a chance. During my time playing, you always seen the sort of Sky commentators or the radio commentators who are on the field and around, and you were there to have a conversation with. You were bouncing off ideas. You were all in the same circle. So even the young guys who didn't have the fortune to play against Warne, they've always been in connection with him, and they've grown up. We've all grown up watching that great Australian side. Glenn McGrath, Shane Warne, the combination of the two, and so he's touched so many lives. It will still be talking about Shane Warne in 100 years.
Yeah,
people will still be talking about Shane Warne in 100 years, and I think that's the biggest compliment I can pay Shane Warne. We talk about Don Bradman as an icon of the game, and we all refer back to the Don Bradman, who was of the 30s and 40s. In 100 years' time, cricketers will be still talking about Shane Warne, not because he was that good, but everything about Shane Warne was that good, the man and the cricketer.
Well
Steve,
said,
thank you very much. Well said. Thank you, Jarrod. Good to talk to you both. That's Steve Harmison and Jarrod. Jarrod Kimber there. Just to remind you of the news that has broken in the last 25 minutes or so. Shane Warne has died, age 52, on a holiday in Thailand. I think we're all still trying to take that in. The tributes will continue. The Cricket Collective is live on Sunday night from 8 p.m. here on talkSPORT, and we'll be paying tribute to Shane. We'll continue doing that in the company of another of his old friends in the commentary box and beyond. Bumble joins us very shortly.